January 1879, a 15-year-old boy makes the bold decision to leave his family farm and head to the city of Detroit. At a time when automobiles were a luxury reserved for the wealthy, he walked away from the calm of the countryside with a single dream: to build his own car company, one that would change the entire industry. 36 years later, that risky decision made everything worth it. In the city of Detroit, and nearly half of the cars around the world would carry his name. And that boy, who once left the farm behind, would go on to become one of the richest men of all time. This is the story of Henry Ford. But what most people don't know is this: he wasn't supposed to succeed. He failed, got pushed out of his own company, and watched someone else turn his vision into a completely different empire. And somehow, he still came back and built something no one thought it was possible. Henry Ford wasn't born into industry. He was born on a farm, a place built on routine, repetition, and hard manual labor. And from the outside, his future looked obvious: take over the farm, follow the same path as his father, live the same life. But Henry couldn't stand it, not because it was hard, but because it was slow, predictable, unchanging. While everyone around him focused on the land, Henry was obsessed with something else: machines. He would take things apart, study them, rebuild them, not for school, not for work, just to understand how they worked. And once he started, he couldn't stop. At 15 years old, Henry made a decision that would change everything. He left. No plan, no guarantees, just one goal in mind: get as far away from the farm as possible. He moved to Detroit. At the time, it was becoming one of the fastest growing industrial cities in America. Factories, engines, opportunity. For the first time, Henry was surrounded by the one thing he actually cared about: machines. He took whatever work he could find: mechanic, apprentice, repair jobs, anything that kept him close to engines. But nothing came easy. He was fired from his first job just days after starting. Money was tight, so tight that he had to take a second job, repairing watches at night just to survive. Days working with engines, nights fixing tiny gears under dim light. It was exhausting, but it gave him something far more valuable than comfort: skill. Because while everyone else was just working, Henry was learning, constantly, obsessively. And without realizing it, he was preparing for something much bigger. But the breakthrough he was chasing, didn't come from steam. It came from something new. For years, Henry had been surrounded by steam engines, huge machines, slow to start, heavy, unreliable. That was the standard. That was how the world moved. But then he came across something different: a gasoline engine, smaller, faster, more efficient. And almost no one in the United States understood it yet, while most people ignored it. Henry became obsessed, not just with using it, but with understanding it. There was one problem: he knew nothing about electricity, and gasoline engines depended on it. So instead of avoiding the gap, he went straight into it. He took a job at the Edison Illuminating Company, not because it paid well, but because it gave him access to power systems, access to engineers, access to knowledge he didn't have. During the day he worked. At night he experimented, studying, testing, failing over and over again, until one day something finally worked. His first gasoline engine, small, imperfect, but real. And for the first time, the idea wasn't just in his head anymore. It existed. And once he built the engine, the next step was obvious. Once the engine worked, the next step felt obvious: build a vehicle around it. Not a train, not a machine for factories. A personal vehicle, something that could move without horses. In 1896, after years of experimenting in silence, Henry finally did it. He built his first car. He called it the quadricycle. It was simple, almost crude: 4 bicycle wheels, a lightweight frame, and a small gasoline engine. No doors, no roof, no real safety, but it moved, and that was enough. For Henry, it was proof. The future didn't belong to steam, it belonged to gasoline. So he did what most inventors try to do next. He tried to turn it into a business, and that's where things started to fall apart. Because building something that works is very different from building something that sells. His first company failed, not slowly, not quietly, completely. Investors didn't agree with his vision. Production was slow, costs were high, and the cars weren't ready. Within a short time, he was out, fired from his own company. Just like that. For most people, that's the end of the story, but for Henry, it was just the beginning. Because getting fired didn't stop him. It forced him to rethink everything. Getting fired should have ended it. No company, no backing, no trust from investors. But instead of trying to rebuild the same way, Henry changed the game. He stopped trying to sell cars and started trying to prove them. At the time, there was one place where machines could instantly gain attention: racing. If your car was fast, people noticed. If your car won, people believed. So Henry went all in. He designed a racing car unlike anything he had built before. More power, more speed, less concern about comfort, more focus on performance. Then he found a driver, not a professional, a former bicycle racer named Barney Oldfield. someone with raw instinct, not experience, and together they entered the race. No one expected much. Henry had already failed once. His name didn't carry weight, but what happened next changed everything. His car won, not barely, decisively, and overnight, everything flipped. The same people who doubted him now paid attention, because in that moment, he wasn't just another failed inventor anymore. He was the man who built the fastest car in America. And investors love one thing more than ideas: proof. And with that proof, Henry got one more chance to build a company. This time, Henry didn't just want to build cars. He wanted to change who could own one, because at that time, cars weren't for everyone. They were expensive, hand-built, slow to produce, and mostly owned by the rich. Henry saw that and rejected it completely. He didn't want to build a better car. He wanted to build a simpler one, a car that regular people could actually afford, a car built for the masses. That was the vision behind the new Ford Motor Company. Not luxury, not exclusivity, scale. But there was a problem. Even with a simple design, production was still slow. Every car had to be built piece by piece, by skilled workers. It took time, and time meant cost, which meant the car still wasn't accessible. The vision was clear, but the system couldn't support it. Once again, Henry was stuck, until he saw something in a place no one would expect. The solution didn't come from a factory. It came from something far less glamorous: a slaughterhouse. During a visit to Chicago, Henry saw something unusual. Instead of workers moving around the product moved to the workers. Step by step, station by station, each person doing one simple task over and over again. It wasn't elegant, it wasn't creative, but it was fast, and more importantly, it was scalable. That idea stayed with him, because suddenly everything clicked. What if cars were built the same way, not by one skilled worker assembling everything, but by many workers, each doing one small part? He brought the idea back, started experimenting, testing, adjusting, and when it finally worked, it changed everything. Before the assembly line, building a single car could take over 12 hours. After it, just 90 minutes. That wasn't an improvement. That was a revolution. Production exploded. Costs dropped. And for the first time, Henry's vision became real. A car for the average person. The Model T, simple, reliable, affordable, and suddenly, people who never imagined owning a car could. And once the Model T took over, Ford didn't just win the market, he dominated it. Once the Model T took off, there was no stopping it. Production scaled faster than anyone had ever seen. Prices kept dropping. Demand kept rising. And soon, the impossible became reality. At one point, nearly half of all cars in the world were Fords. Think about that. Not a large share, not a leading brand. Half. Henry Ford hadn't just built a successful company. He had reshaped an entire industry. Factories changed, labor changed, business itself changed, and for a while, it looked like he had solved everything. But success has a way of hiding problems. Because while Ford focused on efficiency, the world kept evolving. Customers started wanting more, better design, more comfort, more variety, and competitors saw the opportunity. Companies like Chevrolet began offering something Ford didn't: choice. Meanwhile, Henry refused to change. He believed the Model T was enough, that people didn't need options, that his system was already perfect. Even when his own team warned him, even when his own son pushed for change, he ignored it, and slowly the numbers started to drop. Sales declined. Competitors gained ground. And for the first time in years, Ford wasn't leading anymore. He had built the system that changed the world, but now that same system was holding him back. And in the end, the man who built the future almost got left behind by it. In the end, Henry Ford did something very few people ever do. He changed how the world works, not just by building a product, but by redefining how that product is made. The assembly line didn't just make cars faster, it transformed entire industries. Manufacturing.Labor, business at scale. It became the blueprint for the modern world. But his story isn't just about success. It's about the cost of believing too much in your own system. Because the same mindset that helped him dominate also made him resist change. And for a moment, he fell behind. Still, his impact was already irreversible. Cars became accessible, industries became scalable, and the idea of mass production became the standard, all because one person refused to accept how things were done and chose to rebuild the system instead. Henry Ford didn't just build cars, he built the future, and whether we notice it or not, we're still living inside it.